learn about how to develop IEPs, we will talk about how to make those IEPs based on the Virginia Standards of Learning. All states are required to have educational standards. In Virginia, we have the Virginia Standards of Learning. The purpose of standards is to provide an accountability system that ensures that all students are receiving a quality education. This includes students with an individual education plan. Therefore, it's very important that when you develop an IEP, you make sure that all parts of that IEP are based on the standards of learning for that student's grade level. There are several resources available on the Virginia Department of Education website that can help with developing standard-based IEPs. We'll actually be reviewing most of these in our course. We'll be talking about the standards-based IEP guidance document. We'll be looking at the standards-based IEP training modules. We'll also be reviewing the standard-based IEP worksheets. These are basically templates that can help lead you through the process of including standards in an IEP. We'll also look at some sample goals and an actual sample of a standards-based IEP. All of these resources are available at the link below. It's easy to develop standards-based goals if you have identified needs based on the standards. Then it's very natural that your goals should be based on the standards. The worksheets that we discussed earlier will help you with this process of selecting goals that are related to the standards. Now, it's very important also that the goals be individualized, and they must be meaningful for that specific student. So sometimes you may have a goal that is related to a standard but not exactly the same as the standard. For example, you may expect that student to master only part of a certain SOL standard, or maybe a very important prerequisite to that specific standard. Keeping in mind that a student's goals need to be obtainable within 1 year for that student. So it can be kind of tricky, but it's very important that you consider two things. It needs to be directly related to the standard, but at the same time individualized to that specific student so that it is meaningful for them and obtainable for them. We should carefully consider the standards in each part of the IEP. For example, in the present level of academic achievement and functional performance, when we are discussing strengths, we should include the student's strengths based on their grade level standards. When we're discussing needs, we should indicate how the student's needs impact their progress in the standards. When we look at the effects of the disability, we should include how the student's disability may impact their progress in the SOL curriculum. And when you're describing academic skills, it's very important to discuss how the student's academic performance or how that student is performing academically in the actual curriculum. Good examples of how you could show this is providing benchmark tests. Be sure that you explain those tests. Previous SOL scores, and again, be sure to describe those scores. Any curriculum-based assessments that the classroom teacher may have given to the students' grades, and general observations. Basically, when you're discussing their academic skills, be sure that you make it clear to those who are looking at that IEP where that student is in the SOL curriculum. All students should participate in state testing. There may be a very few exceptions, but we won't even discuss those. That's going to be individual to each school, but most all students should participate in one way or another. A very small number, 1% or less of the students, may participate in an alternate assessment. In Virginia, this is called the Virginia Alternate Assessment, or the VAP. It is a different type of assessment, but still based on the standards. Students may be eligible for accommodations on SOL test. You need to be aware of those options and of what your school district's eligibility criteria is for each of those options. But when you're developing an IEP, keep in mind how that student will be participating in testing so that we can measure their progress in the standards. It's also important to consider grade level standards when selecting services for a student. All students have a right to quality instruction by a staff member who is highly qualified to teach in the specific content area. This makes the least restrictive environment even more important. If a student's in a co-teaching setting in a general ed classroom, you have the wonderful combination of a person who can provide specialized instruction while you have another teacher who's a content specialist. If it's necessary that a student be pulled from the general ed classroom for some small group instruction, it is very important that that instruction is still based on the standards and that the person who's providing that instruction is qualified to teach in that content area. As we go through each module, we'll be talking more about how we can include the standards in each part of the IEP. In the end, you will be able to make sure that you can defend your IEP by showing how it is based on the standards of learning.